Hello kindred longevity lifestyle designers, this is Gavin here with secretsoflongevity.com. I am going to do a recipe for you guys here today. And if you remember 2 videos ago, I did a video on harvesting yellow dock seeds. There's a bit of confusion. At first I thought it was lamb quarter. I uploaded the video. I had a viewer tell me that it looked a lot like yellow dock that they had harvested once, and I checked, and yes, it was yellow dock. And I edited the video and re-uploaded it. So you can check that video out here if you haven't seen it yet, if you want to learn how to identify it and harvest the seeds to make a recipe similar to this, or even copy this recipe. And yeah, basically what I did is you saw the seeds that I had harvested in that video. So this is just after a day of processing, and you can see the seeds are still dark and fine. They're still wet because I had just soaked them for about 12 hours overnight. And what I had done before that was I made sure they were completely dry. They were dry in the plant pretty much, but I let them sit out, spread out to dry fully. Then I had a sieve, which I actually borrowed from someone, so I don't have it anymore. And I put portions of it in there, and actually just on this bowl, I'd have the sieve over the bowl, and I'd run my knuckles against it and almost like break open the hulls, or the shells that kind of are in between, not completely covering the seed. By doing that, I got rid of some of the excess hull, I guess. I didn't get rid of it all, and it is edible. It's just extra fiber, but I was trying to get rid of as much as possible, and there was a bunch of powder at the bottom of the bowl when it was done. Not a whole lot came off, but you also make sure by doing that you're getting all the extra leaves or twigs or whatever's mixed in. And then, yeah, I washed it, then soaked it for the 12 hours, and then rinsed it once again, and here we are. It's been sitting out drying. And I'm going to grind all this up, and I'm going to measure out 1 cup's worth of this, if it even makes a cup. So the properties of yellow dock, of course, are very high in iron, complete protein. I'd be curious to see if it has a high rutin content similar to buckwheat, may or may not. If it does, that's very good for the veins and arteries. So it's a really great liver tonic herb. And it's also rich in alkaline minerals like sodium, calcium, potassium, etc. So we're just going to zip this up to make a flour out of it. I've made a bit of an error. It's still kind of damp. I didn't realize it was going to stick to the sides and not get chopped up by the blender if it was damp. So I'd highly recommend making sure it's completely dry before trying to turn it into a powder. So what I'm going to do is actually just add one of the liquid ingredients that we'd be adding anyways to make the pancake mix. Oh, I don't think I mentioned that. We're making pancakes. So 1 cup of milk will make sure all of that seed and material keeps circulating and getting finely chopped up. So this is pasteurized milk, but it is grass-fed and unhomogenized, which is a unique thing that I can find around here when I can't get a hold of raw milk because of its legality in Ontario. And that chunk is actually the cream that was at the top that is very hard. So we're going to get a chance to blend that up with this because it is whole milk. So here we go. We're going to blend this for quite a while just to make sure it's all finely chopped up. So yeah, that seems pretty fine. We've got the Vitamix. It's such a powerful blender, we may as well just add all the ingredients in here. I was going to try and mix them all up into this bowl, but we don't need that now. So if you're at home and you just have like a regular powered blender, you might want to either create your own flour first, or if you want to attempt it, you could always just add all the ingredients to a blender as well. Next thing we're going to add is some buckwheat. Now this is first sprouted, then re-dehydrated buckwheat. So you get buckwheat at the store and it's like crunchy, almost like little kernels. Some people eat it straight like that. It's quite hard on the digestion because it is going to have some enzyme inhibitors. So as you see, there's almost like little tails on a lot of these little kernels. And that's because it's sprouted for 1 to 2 days. And then I removed it, spread it on a dehydrator sheet, and dehydrated it in large quantities. And it turns into these little hard crunchy things which stay good for quite a long time as long as you get them completely dry. I've had these for about a year. Still smell fine. I ate them recently and they tasted totally fine. We're going to measure out 1 cup of these because we're assuming that was about 1 cup of the yellow dock seeds, and we're going to do an equivalent amount of the buckwheat. Of course, that's going to get all stuck in there because I have milk in there. So I'm actually almost out of milk. I don't think that's going to be a whole cup's worth. Yeah, that's about half a cup. And we're going to do the rest as cream. So if you've never done this, this makes for very rich pancakes. I wouldn't recommend doing it all cream, but this is just half and half cream I usually use in coffee. Same brand. Raw, not raw, but grass-fed dairy. I'm actually going to add about half of this, and we're going to see how much of it we need. Next, we're going to add 2 teaspoons of baking powder, I believe. Yes. I had to borrow that from someone as well. I don't usually keep that in my home. Then 2 pastured eggs. So roughly when you're making pancakes from scratch, you're adding about 1 cup of flour to 1 egg to 1 teaspoon of baking soda to 1 cup of liquid to 1 tablespoon or so of oil. You don't even have to add oil, but it makes it smoother. Could even do a little less. I might try 2 teaspoons. And then I'm just making double the quantity. I suspect actually the yellow dock wasn't as full as I thought it was. It looked like a cup, but it was a very loose cup in terms of the seeds being very fluffy almost. So we're going to add some other items to help thicken it up in terms of the powder side of it. This is some pine pollen. You can find links below for a lot of these items that aren't just regular everyday foods. So the pine pollen is a big one. We're going to add 1 teaspoon total of the pine pollen powder. I'm going to add a dash of salt, just 3 grinds of this salt grinder. We're going to add a teaspoon of hushu as well. It's a nice complement to the pine pollen. This is Hyperion Herbs hushu. You can find links for both that as well as the pine pollen below. We're going to add a little bit of maca extract. This is from Longevity Power. And I've taken the air bags or air packets out of this prematurely, and I've noticed the whole thing has turned to quite hard because some moisture has obviously gotten in those, those little packets that absorb moisture. So that's just like a telltale sign that those actually do something. And finally, I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of coconut oil. I don't believe I did quite a full double amount in terms of the flours. So I'm going to be conservative with some of the liquids I'm adding into this so that's not too runny when we go to cook it. You also use oil when you cook pancakes, so may as well not go overboard with that. Finally, I think that's for monster later. Now we're just going to zip this up and see how it comes out. So really let that get nice and thoroughly powdered down, broken down as much as possible. It's quite smooth looking. It tastes like pancake batter. It's got a unique flavor to it because these are very, I guess you could say in terms of the plant world, gamey type tasting plant foods. So it's going to be interesting what comes of this. It's looking a little too liquidy for my liking. Much too liquidy, actually. So I'm very glad we didn't add that extra milk. So I'm simply going to add more of the buckwheat to it. Worst comes to worst, this is just going to be like Wildfood crepes instead of pancakes. So that is actually quite a bit thicker. I can see that now that it's still on the thin side, very on the thin side, but I like this. It's actually starting to heat up, so I don't want to blend that any longer. And the very last thing we're going to add but not blend are some blueberries. We're going to make blueberry pancakes. These are wild blueberries I picked up at my cottage a week ago. They're very fresh. They're the most amazing blueberries I've ever tasted. They're truly wild in that they're quite small, but they're still sweet and absolutely delicious, very dark. And pancakes and blueberries is something I've had for decades. I ended up making more than I originally wanted to, so we're going to also top it off with some wild blueberries I purchased. They're probably the exact same variety. The only difference is that they're frozen, and that just gives us a greater abundance of them in there. The first thing we're going to do is just add a dollop of coconut oil. Try not to get it all down the side of this jar. Spread that around. Meanwhile, making sure that the pan gets quite warm, on medium, maybe slightly higher than medium to heat up, but then turn it down to medium once you start cooking the pancakes. It's really not too bad. But yeah, you can see that they're a little thinner than normal if you've ever made pancakes from like a ready mix or anything like that. I quite like the smell of them. If you've never had buckwheat before, you're going to notice it's a bit of a different smell, or even flavor as well. Now, you're going to know when to flip it, when not just when you see bubbles around the outside forming, but you actually start seeing it looking cooked all the way in there. At a certain point, after a few minutes, you can lift them up to see how well done they are under there. You don't want it too hot because they'll cook too fast and burn, but you will actually end up with some being undercooked in the middle if you're doing them fairly thick. Since these are so thin, it's okay to have the heat a little higher. Now, I only had the camera off for less than a minute, and you can see how quickly it's almost looking cooked at the edges and the bubbles are getting closer in, and that's when you know it's time to flip it. So I would even turn this down slightly so it's not cooking quite so fast. And yeah, you just have to go by eyeballing it, really. That's perfect. It's not overdone, it's not black. Push it a little too close to this one, but I think we're going to be okay. Yeah, broke that one already, but whatever. I'm the one eating them, I don't need to impress anyone. I'm not going to make you guys watch me cook all of them, but I'm going to do one more with just one in the center so you can see it perhaps in a different way. And I will do one where I don't break it. And generally it's going to take a little less time on the bottom side. Now, I don't regularly eat pancakes. Some people are going to criticize me for eating fried food. The whole anti-fried food thing is really kind of silly when you think about the reasons for why a lot of health people talk about fried food being bad. It's not because of the temperature, it's because of what you're cooking. If you're cooking with vegetable oil, it's going to be worse than coconut oil or butter. Another big thing is that if you consider a lot of Asian countries where there's a lot of longevity, they cook with woks. That's just a warped frying pan. It's under the heat, you're stir frying. It's seen as healthy, but making pancakes or cooking eggs in a griddle is somehow unhealthy. It's not the case. Deep frying is unhealthy. Frying in lots of vegetable oil is unhealthy. And actually, really long-term slow cooking can often be unhealthy because you're really browning meats, you're browning starches, and that's when you get those carcinogenic compounds created. As long as you're not blackening stuff, and you can see when the pan starts smoking, you're done and you need to get stuff out of there. I was talking and not paying attention. These are a little more well done on that one side, but they're still good to go. I'm going to add a tiny bit more oil. And as I was saying before, just my little spiel on frying, yes, steaming, boiling, all those forms of cooking are going to produce fewer carcinogenic compounds in reality, but it's so minimal, and to say you're going to eat every single type of meat you ever eat, or every food you eat, as being only cooked through one method is really boring and just not realistic. So once again, barely had the camera off for a minute when I can see that it's pretty much done on that side, so I can tell from the edges. Lift that whole pancake up and flip perfectly. So there we have it. This is completely done. Don't know what that bulge is in the middle. Probably just blueberries. Take that off. I'm going to actually turn it off for now and finish the rest of the batter later. Next, you're just going to take your butter and put it on the pancakes while they're still hot. And add maple syrup. So you can see how easy it is to actually make pancakes from scratch without a pre-made mix. A lot of people rely on that, but all the mix is essentially the flour with the baking soda in it. It's just 2 ingredients. So you can also see how easy it would be to eat this while camping, on a canoe trip, whatever. You'd have to have probably dehydrated eggs, maybe dehydrated milk powder, and just add boiled water to it from a lake or any other kind of purified water. And there you have it. Let's see what these taste like. I haven't even tasted them between the camera shots there. Looks good. Butter's not melting right away, but those are really good. You have to appreciate the taste of buckwheat because the buckwheat comes through more. I don't even know what the yellow dock tastes like. I tried a few seeds in my mouth earlier. Didn't really find it had an overwhelming flavor. If anything, it's the buckwheat that has a flavor, so you could add yellow dock to any other type of flour if you prefer another flavor like spelt. You could probably buy flours that have been either sprouted and then turned to flour, or you could sprout your own grains and turn them to flour. That way you're avoiding the enzyme inhibitors, because that does not happen with most conventional flours you would buy in a store, even organic flour. Unless it's fermented or sprouted or both, you're really doing your body a disservice by consuming it. Incredible. One of my favorite foods. Grew up on it. Obviously not the ideal sprouted type of flour-based pancakes, but now I have easy ways to make it with Wildfoods. And let me know if you've ever made a recipe that's as easy as this with any kind of wild food, or taken a wild seed and turned it to a flour. So check out those links below if you want to try pine pollen or hoshwu powder. And like, favorite, and share the video if you feel so inclined. With that, I'll talk to you next time. Take care and embrace life without limits.